It's unbelievable that this is our last optional T workshops to help faculty getting better idea about how technology can support you to design this vacations grading structure. So all the recording links are now included in the Canvas site. So feel free to log into the UCI Canvas site where you use during the bootcamp to watch any of these recordings if you miss any of the sessions. And next slide, please. If you want to learn more about these workshops, I think there is a document there, but I guess you don't need to register anymore since this is the last one. We're gonna edit all the workshops and then also post it on YouTube, and that will be included on the T website. And next slide, please. So today, we're thrilled to have Jennifer found UC Irvine to show us about Gradescope. She's our instructional designer. Without long overdue, let's get today's session started. Thanks, Jennifer.
All right, thank you, Megan. So once again, hi everyone. My name is Jennifer Fong. I'm an instructional designer at UC Irvine, and welcome to this Gradescope workshop. So for those of you who are participants of the T program, I've been learning about specifications grading and mastery learning, right alongside you. And once again, while this workshop will go through the step-by-steps of Gradescope, we'll also be focusing more of our attention on how to specifically use it for mastery learning and for specifications grading. Throughout this presentation, I will try to pause as much as I can for questions, but we do have a lot of content to cover. So please actually feel free to just type your questions directly in the chat. I have both Danya Rahimi, instructional designer from Cal Poly Pomona, and Kaylee Baez, an instructional designer from UCI. They're going to be supporting me in the chat. And so they'll be providing helpful links and resources and also answering your questions as we go. So, feel free to just use the chat for your questions, right? Okay, so all right, so today's agenda. I've set it up on this slide for you. And actually, you know what, Kaylee, if you could put the presentation slides into the chat, that would be awesome. So you can actually follow along with me as I go. Today's agenda, I also actually set it up as a table of contents for your reference. So if you're in the slideshow, you can actually click on any of these links and it will jump to the starting slide of that topic. So today what we're going to do is we're going to first start with a quick overview of Gradescope. We're then going to show you how to get started, how to set up your Gradescope assignments, how to use Rubrics specifically for specifications grading, and how Gradescope's analytics can help you evaluate student mastery of your course content. We're then going to show you a few examples of different assignments and rubrics. And then finally, we'll review best practices and certain considerations that you have to think about as you decide whether or not this tool is suitable for your course. And then at the end of this workshop, we're going to have time for questions. And then hopefully by 2 o'clock, we will be able to go into breakout rooms where there's a few different topics that you'll be able to choose from. Okay, so really quick, first, as a quick review for those of you who have kind of only heard of Gradescope in passing, but you're really not sure what it is. Gradescope is an online assessment and grading tool, and it was really initially designed to make grading pen and paper assessments much easier. So the concept is an instructor would not have to convert their handwritten workshop or worksheets and exams to a digital format, and instead, this program is kind of designed to help instructors mark up and designate fields where handwritten answers would be expected to be written in. And students' handwritten work can actually then be submitted to the professor, it can be scanned, uploaded, and then analyzed so that all the grading can actually then be done digitally. So that's kind of how Gradescope was first initially created. Gradescope actually then has this streamlined rubric system to really make grading fast, efficient, and consistent. And since then, the program has evolved to include online or digital exams, which is very similar to Canvas quizzes. So you could technically do all of your assessment in Gradescope. And then also they've also included code assignments, which can be auto-graded, which is an awesome feature of Gradescope, which is why a lot of STEM faculty also like to use it. So overall, Gradescope is just a very powerful tool, and it's been, once again, particularly popular with instructors teaching in the STEM fields. Right? So now, why would you use Gradescope for specs grading? So the main appeal of Gradescope, especially for specs grading, is that unlike Canvas's speed grader, grading in Gradescope is actually done question by question and not student by student. So this makes it a lot easier for TAs to grade consistently and really lets them focus in on the class's understanding of a specific question. And actually, it's also a lot easier to gauge, when you're grading the same question for each student rather than grading entire assignment and then, grading the next student's entire assignment. So that really helps with that consistency. So another appeal of Gradescope is that rubrics are created at the question level. And if you adjust a rubric item for one question, it will actually retroactively adjust for that question in all assignments you've already graded. So with specs grading, rubric creation and letting students know exactly what knowledge or what skill they should be demonstrating at this specific question level is particularly important, right? And finally, Gradescope has extremely detailed analytics, and you can actually even tag your assignment questions with learning objectives or concept. And this level of detail really allows you to evaluate how your individual students are doing with specific concepts in your course, and then how your class is doing as a whole with those specific concepts. So it really helps with the understanding and evaluating that mastery learning aspect. All right, so first we are going to go over how to get started with Gradescope, and more specifically, how to set up an account and also link it with Canvas. Like Megan mentioned, it may be slightly different from campus to campus, but overall, what I'm going to be showing you how to do it through, how to set Gradescope up through the Canvas side. Right. So the first thing that you're going to do is you would go to the Canvas course that you want to use Gradescope in, and then you're going to click on this settings tab on the bottom. And then up on the top, you're going to go to the navigation tab, and then you're going to scroll down your list on the bottom, and you're going to look for Gradescope. And then you're going to click on the 3 dots there and make sure you click enable. So now you've enabled Gradescope in your course, and also make sure you scroll all the way to the bottom of this page and hit save. I always forget to do that. So hit that save button, and then Gradescope will then be enabled, and then you'll see that it will show up on the left-hand side of your course navigation. Students will then be able to also see this. We'll also be able to see Gradescope in their course navigation, and they can click on Gradescope through Canvas, and that's how it will prompt them to set up their account. So it's very seamless, very easy for students to set it up if you decide to use it in your course. Okay, so now what we're going to do is once it's set up in Canvas, you're actually going to click on Gradescope, and then it's going to tell you, if this is the first time using Gradescope, actually you might have a little bit more account setup to do, but once that's done, it's going to tell you, do you want to create a new Gradescope course, or do you want to link this Canvas course to an existing Gradescope course? So most likely what you're going to do is set up a new Gradescope course, right? And then you're going to link it. All right, so the next thing you're going to be prompted to do once you go, and you set up a new course, is you're going to have to your course number and name, right? Over here for the entry code, we recommend that you don't check this box if you're using Gradescope through Canvas, because this will just kind of confuse things, and you don't want people enrolling into your Gradescope course outside of Canvas, especially if you want to sync your roster. So you could leave that unchecked unless you decide to use Gradescope outside of Canvas, then you can use this setting. Here, this is very important in the setup. You want to make sure you're actually linked your Gradescope course to the correct Canvas course. So if it's not the correct course, so here's the name of the course. If it's not the correct course, make sure you change that link. All right, and then further down in the grading defaults, we have something called positive and negative scoring for specifications grading. And we'll talk about this more later, because I know this probably doesn't make sense now. But for specs grading, we actually recommend that you change this to positive scoring, and we'll explain why later. But it's important that when you're setting up your course, that that setting is there, and that you can change it so all of your assignments default to that positive scoring. Okay, then make sure you update your course, and then your course for the most part is all set up. The final step that you have to do in terms of just getting started is to set up your course roster. So what you would do is you would click on this roster tab on the left-hand side, and you would click on the sync roster button on the bottom. So Gradescope is a little funny. There are navigation items along the left, there are navigation items along the bottom. So you kind of, as you're learning how to navigate this program, you want to kind of check both sections to see if there's anything you're missing, right? Here you actually do have the option to manually add students or TAs. But once again, wouldn't really recommend it unless you want to add someone outside of your Canvas course. Otherwise, it's really best just to use this sync with Canvas roster. And so that's pretty much it. It's a pretty straightforward setup. So now that everything is all set up and you're ready to go, the next part we're going to talk about is how exactly you can start creating assignments and how to link those Gradescope assignments back into Canvas. Right. So the first thing that you would do after your account is set up is you're going to click this Assignments tab. Right. Then on the bottom here, so remember 2 areas of navigation. On the bottom, you're going to click Create Assignment. Okay. And you're going to be asked to select an assignment type. So note that there are 5 different assignment types that you can choose from in Gradescope. So before we move forward, I kind of want to talk about this a little bit more so you understand what each is. Right. So I know I like the Scantron, so we're not going to go there for this. So we're going to talk about the other 4, which need a little bit more explanation. So what you have is you have your exam, homework, programming assignment, and online assignment. So now the main difference between exam and homework is really the default settings for each. Otherwise, to be honest, it doesn't really matter which one you pick. Like Gradescope doesn't even note like this is an exam, this is a homework. It all depends on how you actually title that assignment. But if you pick exam, what happens is the default setting would be that instructors are going to be the one collecting, scanning, and uploading student work. Right. And then while for the homework, if you choose homework assignment, the default setting is your students will be the ones in charge of scanning and uploading their work. Right. Now, under exam and homework, you have this additional option called fixed length or templated assignment versus a variable length assignment. And it's important that you know the difference between the two. What this means is that you can either have students fill out a very specific fixed length worksheet where you indicate exactly where they should write, what boxes they should fill out. So if you imagine like a math worksheet, this is where I want students to give me the answers. This is, this is for question 1, this is for question 2. That would be a fixed length assignment. A variable length assignment is one in which you just give students a piece of paper with multiple questions, and let's say they need to write their answers, and it could be as long as they want. So they could have multiple pages to answer these, let's say these 4 questions that you give them. And that would be called a variable length assignment. So once again, for exams, it automatically defaults to a fixed length templated assignment. And for homework, the default is a variable length. So it's important that you know the difference in order to just determine which one you're selecting, right? Now, the next assignment type is a programming assignment. And I'll be very honest with you, they're a bit beyond my understanding. So, if you know, coding and programming and things like that, this is the thing for you. Many faculty have reported a lot of success. They love using Gradescope for their programming assignments. But basically what it is that students can submit code files of any file type, or you can submit through GitHub and Bitbucket. And then what you can do is provide that's all I'm going to mention. All right. Oh, also, you can also click on any of these headings to learn more about those assignments. Right. And the last assignment type is called an online assignment. And this is something that Gradescope is still working on. It's technically still in beta, but basically this tool allows you to create assignments and assessments directly within Gradescope. You can use LaTeX and Markdown to format all the questions, but if you're not familiar with those languages, that's okay also. There's a visual interface you can use to build your assignments. So when you think of Gradescope online assignments, think about, they're very similar to Canvas quizzes, all right? So that's basically, you're going to be either using Canvas quizzes or you're going to be using Gradescope online assignments. So I've actually linked here a comparison chart that's developed by Cornell, where you can kind of see the differences between Gradescope's online assignments and Canvas quizzes. And that way you can use that to determine, which one would work best for you. And by the way, if you see this little blue information icon on the left, you can click on it to learn more about, assignment types in general. So, any page where you see that, you can click on it for more information, right? Okay, so I'm going to pause here just for a sec. Does anyone have any questions about these assignment types? It's very important that you understand this before, we go further into the program.
And I understand that we kind of go over some of the details very quickly, just because we want to kind of get this basic setup not underway, but we're not sure, how familiar each of the faculty with Gradescope. So we want to use a very quick 20 minutes, just kind of go over how to get the basic setup so we can square the rest of the time to really talk about specifications grading Gradescope. So we want to pause a little bit to make sure you have a good idea about what Gradescope does and how you can get started. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask it now before we talk more. So
I have one question. We also create these questions in lockdown browser.
So, lockdown browser, yes.
Lockdown browser. So
yep.
In what way is this different from, if we're using this, we don't have to worry about lockdown browser then?
Actually, so that is another thing that is in beta. So online assignments, which is once again similar to Canvas quizzes, it is currently supporting lockdown browser. So but what you have to do to enable it for your course is you actually have to call Gradescope. So there's actually documentation online. We can send that to you. But lockdown browser will work with Gradescope online assignments. So basically, if you set up an online assignment, you could enable lockdown browser and it will lock it down just like you do it in Canvas. So it's that is an option if you would like. We're not going to talk about it in this presentation, but it is something that is possible in Gradescope.
And we can probably send out the information through emails after today's session. And Jennifer, there's a couple questions in the chat.
Sure, yep, I'll take a look. You can change the default exam type to change to variable length if desired. So what's kind of funny with that default for the exam type is you can switch it, but you have to switch it to student submission. So if its student is submitting, then it can be a variable length. But if the instructor is submitting, for some reason, it only allows for fixed length. And I think the mentality there is if you're handing things out for students and you're going to be the one scanning it, most likely it will be a fixed length assignment because you're literally giving them papers and then taking those papers and putting it in. Because if they're going to be typing a variable length assignment where there's multiple pages, most likely going to be doing that in the classroom with you. They'll probably be doing that at home. So yeah, but you can switch it. If you select exam, then you select student submit and you select variable length, you could do it that way. And then once again, it doesn't really say anywhere this is an exam. It just depends on how you title the assignment. Yeah. Yep. All right. Any other questions? That was a good question. It's a little bit, that thing was a little bit weird too. When when we were looking at the program, we were wondering why it doesn't let you do an instructor submitted fixed length, but yeah. All right. Okay. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next section, which is, so the way that we kind of want to show you how Gradescope assignments really work is we're actually going to walk you through a history lab report assignment. It is all open-ended. So, once again, it's a PDF file that you'll be giving to your students with all these questions on it. And because it is open-ended, it's going to be a variable length assignment because they can probably type as many pages as they want for each of these questions, right? So what we're going to do in Gradescope is we're going to end up setting this up as a homework assignment that students will submit with variable length. And what happens on the students' end is that they'll have to designate what pages correspond to which question. So for example, you can find question 2 on page 3. Something like that. And that's going to be very easy for students to set up. It walks them through the process, but that's what the students will have to do for a variable length assignment. Okay. So in Gradescope, what does this look like? How do we set this up? So once again, since this lab report is a homework assignment, right? You're going to select homework and then you're going to click next. Okay. And you're going to give your assignment, a title. Like I said, you can title this whatever you want, exam, worksheet, program. It doesn't really, this doesn't really show up anywhere. So it's all about your assignment name. And then you'll want to provide your template file. So in this case, that PDF lab report that you saw on the previous slide, that's what you would, put in here. Okay. And then you can set, when you want this assignment to be released or available to students, when you want it to be due, and what's the absolute latest date that they can submit, and that would be that late due date. You can also, enforce a time limit if you would like, right? And for the submission type, once again, we mentioned this is a lab report, so it's going to be a variable length. And you also can enable group submissions, so students can submit as a group. Right. And then finally, this is important also, do you want students to be able to download and access the assignment file or worksheet? In the case of a lab report, probably do. You want them to be able to download it. Sometimes you may not want this. And then if you decide not to allow students to download the template, then, whatever instructions that you have, just make sure you put it in Canvas or somewhere else. So that's important. Okay, and then once you have all of your selections made, click create assignment. And once your assignment is created, you'll see a preview on the left here. Before we do anything though with this, this section, what we actually have to do is we have to do one more assignment setting adjustment. And it's kind of strange that it doesn't let you adjust it on that previous screen, but it's just how the program's set up. So you're going to have to go into the settings, and over here, there's one very important thing that you'll have to do, and that's to link your Gradescope assignment to your Canvas assignment. So this is so students can then easily access their Gradescope assignments through Canvas, right? So before we link it, what you actually need to do is you have to create a Canvas assignment, right? So in Canvas, you would go into your assignment section, you would go into add an assignment, and you would create an assignment for this Gradescope assignment. So you would give this assignment a name, and you would give it a description. So make sure that whatever you're doing here actually matches whatever you have in Gradescope. That consistency is very important. You don't want to have different, assignment names, different points and things like that, because otherwise the students will be very confused. So just keep that consistent, right? So point value, is up to you whether you decide to put one in. I know for specs grading, it kind of may be arbitrary. It may not really matter what points you use, but whatever you do use here, make sure you match those points to whatever's in Gradescope, because it literally pushes a specific number. It doesn't push a percentage. So if you made this assignment in Canvas 40 points, but you only made it 20 points in Gradescope, and then if you push your grades into Canvas, then it's going to push 20. It's not going to push 40. So just be careful there. All right. Just make sure those points are the same. Right. Then you're going to scroll down and you're going to pick an external tool. Okay. You're going to click find, and you're going to find Gradescope. Right. So once you've located Gradescope, you're going to click select, and you're, this is going to be set up as an external tool assignment. And you do want to load this tool in a new tab, because honestly, it's kind of hard to look at it for your students, right? Finally, for the assignment due dates here, you do want to, once again, keep them consistent with Gradescope, or you could exclude them from here and just put them in Gradescope. However, one of the big benefits of adding at least a due date here is that it will show up in Canvas's student to-do list. So, that actually is pretty important, but it's up to you how you have that set up, right? So once your assignment here is set up, you can scroll down, hit save, and then your assignment in Canvas is set up, so we can now properly link this Gradescope assignment over into the Canvas assignment. All right, so you're going to choose the correct Canvas assignment, and you're going to click link assignment. Right, so now your assignment is linked and it is ready. It is ready to go. So the last step we have to do before students can actually start submitting is you actually have to set up an outline in Gradescope, and this is very important. So basically what you're going to do is you can add a question for either each section of your assignment or for each specific question in your assignment. It's up to you, but what you have to keep in mind is that each question you create will need to be associated with its own rubric item. So you can kind of almost think about this in terms of your rubric rather than in terms of your questions. So, once again, depends on your assignment, but that's how the first thing you have to do is get that outline set up. So what I did here for this Chem Lab report is that I actually set it up by section. So, I did introduction, theory, results, discussion, and conclusion, right? So once this outline is all set up, and you can also put sub questions, right? I'm going to click that save outline. And then now this is ready for your students to start answering, start submitting their assignments, okay? So once students start submitting their work, you'll actually be able to see all of their submissions by going into manage submission, right? And from here, you can see that all the students have, which students have made a submission, which ones have you graded, right? And if you click on a student name, you can actually see a preview of their latest submission. And you can click on the submission history on the bottom in order to see all the submissions that they've made for this assignment. If you click on that timestamp, it will show you that specific submission. So this is very important to kind of keep in mind here, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but Gradescope actually allows students to submit an assignment an unlimited number of times before the late date. This has extremely big implications when it comes to grading, because you really don't want to grade until after the late date, because students can resubmit at any time before then, and actually it wipes out any grading that you've already done. I mean, you could still see how you graded them previously, but the problem is, if they resubmit, then it's going to once again wipe out your grading, and you'll have to grade again, right? So now that actually students have submitted all of their work, what we're going to talk about next is Gradescope's rubrics and grading, and this is kind of the fun part, right? This is kind of why we're here and why we want to use Gradescope, the grading part. So when you're ready to grade, what you're going to do is you're going to click on this grade submissions tab. And then from your grading dashboard here, you'll see that question outline that you created, right? So then you'll click on a specific question, okay? And you'll be taken to a page where you can find the answer to that question, right? So once again, this is designated by the student. So it'll actually automatically jump you. If I clicked on question 2, it'll jump you directly to wherever the student indicated their question 2 is on, okay? And then on the right here, this is where you're going to be setting up your grading rubric for this question, right? So it's important that you understand how rubrics work in Gradescope before I really show you, how to set it up here. So Gradescope, right? So Gradescope uses the word rubric, but the way it's set up, it doesn't really look like what you're kind of envisioning as a traditional rubric. I'd really say it resembles more of a grading key or a repository of commonly used responses or feedback. So rubrics in Gradescope are actually also set up question by question. And once a rubric is actually set up for a question, it's going to be, that same rubric will be used by all graders. So changes to a rubric will then apply to all questions using that rubric, right? So it's kind of important that you make that clear with your TAs also, right? Now, the default setting for rubrics in Gradescope is negative scoring. What this means is that rubric items are subtracting points from the total points available. So for example, looking at this example here, right? Let's say you have a math assignment and you're evaluating, this equation. When you set up a negative scoring rubric, the way it works is that if a student is missing a notation, so for example, they're missing a negative sign, you can say, okay, that's minus 0.5 points. They're missing a parentheses, okay, that's minus another 0.5 points. So basically you're setting up this grading key for, all graders to use for that question. So all of your TAs know, okay, missing a minus sign is going to be 0.5 points, missing a parentheses is 0.5 points. So it really helps with that grading consistency, right? However, if you think about it, for specs grading, rubrics look a lot more like this, right? So these are the two that Renee had talked about in our T program. The binary rubric, which is a pass, no pass, and a multi-level rubric, right? This example is specifically an EMRN rubric, but these really aren't focused on subtracting points, right? So, how exactly do we then set this up in Gradescope? So thankfully, Gradescope actually has the option for you to switch your grading system to a positive scoring system. So you have, the choice to see what works best for you. And also actually in these options, you can remove score bounds. So, if you wanted to remove the ceiling, you could do that if you want to award, let's say, extra credit and you want students to be able to score more than the maximum amount on that assignment. Okay. So going back to our lab report assignment. Okay, so the rubric that we're going to be using with this assignment is a binary pass, no pass, or needs revision type of rubric. So this is the rubric I want to attach to this assignment. How exactly do I set that up in Gradescope? Right, so the first thing I'm going to want to do over here is actually I have to look at my Gradescope settings. Once again, double check, make sure it is a positive scoring. If you wanted to, you can remove ceiling and floor. So what's important here is actually this can be adjusted per question, which is very interesting. So you could do some positive, some negative, though it's kind of, but yes, you can definitely switch around. You can even do it, even if you set this up as positive scoring, you can still add a negative scored rubric item within here. Right, oops, okay. So, let's say, once again, looking at my rubric on the left, how do I translate that into a grading rubric in Gradescope? Right. Okay. Sorry. So the first thing I actually suggest that you do is you want to create a group that corresponds with your grading criteria. And I'll explain why this is important in a sec. Right. So in this case, your grading group or rubric group would be called introduction. That's the criteria. And then the rubric items that I'm going to add underneath, so you can click on this add rubric item, is going to be your specific rating. So I'm going to add one for full marks, which is going to be, for your purpose introduction. This is, full pass. And then I'm going to add one for no pass or needs revision, right? And I'm going to add these items underneath this group. Okay. Now, the reason why I want to set up a rubric group is specifically for this setting where it says select many. You can actually change this to select one, because when my graders are grading, I want them to accidentally select both. They can select as many of these rubric items as they want. So the only way to allow this type of mutual exclusivity is to set up rubric items within a rubric group. So that'll kind of help you prevent any grading error. Right. So now that my rubric for this question is set up, and when I'm ready to grade, all I have to do is click this Q or 1, and it'll give them 1, or I can click this W, or I can actually use keyboard shortcuts too. I can use Q or W, and then it would, grade 0. All right. Oops. Okay. Also, what you can do in the grading is you can use point adjustments to add or subtract from a student's score outside of these rubric items. And you can also provide specific comments to students and even apply any previously used comments below, right? So once you have this set up for each question, grading becomes very, very quick, right? You can also actually use these tools up on top to hand draw or annotate to point out, specific things on the assignment that you would like to point out in each student's submission, right? Okay. So to move on to the same questions, remember we're grading the same question for the next student. What I'm going to do is I'll click on next ungraded. So this allows many graders to grade simultaneously without fear of overlap, because what Gradescope is doing is moving you on to the next ungraded question, rather than like if you just hit next, it'll just move you on to the next the next submission rather than the next ungraded question. So it's important that your TAs hit that next ungraded to prevent any sort of grading overlap. Okay. So if you wanted to actually move on to the next student, same question, or if instead you want to move on to the next question, same student, you can use this drop down here at the top of the page. And you can then select the next question within this student rather than do the next ungraded, which remember moves on to the next student, same question. So 2 different ways you can do the grading. Right. So finally, when all the grading is complete, you can click on review grades, and then you can then publish these grades, which releases them only in Gradescope. All right, so this doesn't push them to Canvas. But when you're ready to push the grades into Canvas's gradebook, you're going to have to click on this post grades to Canvas button. And by clicking on that, the grades will then show up in Canvas. Okay. All right. And finally, there are 2 more important buttons here. You can either enable, so the regrade request, you can enable or disable this for your assignment. Regrade requests is not the same as a resubmission. This is something you have to keep clear in your head. A regrade request, what this allows a student to do is to dispute a grade on a very specific question in their assignment. So this is more about asking the instructor to please look at my answer again because I think you may have graded it incorrectly and I want you to regrade it. On the other hand, if you want to allow for a student to resubmit, which is a big part of specs grading, right? What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use an extension. So an extension can give them more time to then resubmit their assignment. And this can be specific to a student. So this is once again where you would give students that opportunity to resubmit that assignment. Okay. All right. So I know we just covered a lot. I'm going to pause here. I want to see if anybody has any questions on grading and rubrics. All right. Awesome. Okay. So the last piece here is Gradescope's analytics, right? So you finish grading your students and I want to know overall, how are my students doing in my course? Do they understand my course concepts? Are they mastering the concepts? What areas or learning objectives do I need to focus more of my attention on now, right? So to see analytics, there's 2 different sections. First, if you go to the Review Grades tab, you can actually see a brief overview just of how students performed on that specific assignment. So you can see what the average grade was. You can even sort to see, sort by score to see who's doing particularly well in this assignment, who's having trouble with this assignment, right? But to see further analytics, what you need to do is you're going to click on this Statistics tab. And here you'll see that Gradescope actually breaks down your assignment by question. So you can see the mean score on each question in your assignment. And you can even click on the question and you'll see it's now further broken down by your rubric item. So you can actually see what percentage of students were assigned each rubric item. So here it shows that, okay, for this question 1 or question theory 1A, 50% of my students were assigned a needs revision on this question. So if that's the case, maybe I have to readdress this concept. I can even click on this rubric item now, and I can now see exactly which students and how many of them were assigned this rubric item. So if a large percentage of your students are receiving a needs revision on this question, then you may really need to think about, what were they confused about? And do I need to go back and I have to address this concept, right? So really nice, powerful analytics there for you. Okay. If we go back to the main statistics page, another really cool thing that you can do is you can actually assign tags to assignment questions. Say this addresses student learning objectives 1 and student learning objective 6. I can put SLO1, SLO6. I can put these tags in. So let's say for question 2, I'm going to put SLO1, question 3 addresses SLO6. Now what I can do is on the top right-hand corner, I can click on show tags. And what that's going to do is it's actually going to break down students' performance now by tag. So here, The mean score for questions tagged with student learning objective 6 is 62%. So tagging then helps you further analyze student mastery of your specific learning objectives in your course. And so, once again, really helps with that whole mastery learning concept and understanding how your students have mastered the concepts, right? Other ideas for tags you could do, you can put in textbook chapters here, you can put in lecture numbers, you can put in, overall, course objectives or things like that. So, you can also actually, from a specs grading perspective, you can tag which questions are essential skills, which are more advanced skills, right? So you can kind of see a breakdown of, okay, are my students understanding these specific questions, which should be essential skills, versus these ones which are more advanced and maybe they don't necessarily need to, I wouldn't expect as many people to be able to master these, but essential, we should hope for a large percentage of students to master. Okay. All right. So now you've kind of seen Gradescope all the way from start to finish. So we did account, assignment creation, grading, analyzing your student data. Okay. So I'm going to pause one more time here to see if there are any questions. So this is Gradescope from start to finish at this point.
Carlos asked if the students could see the tags. Donnie just answered, I wasn't sure about that.
That's a good question. I'll be honest, I don't know. I will look into that. I don't remember being able to see from a student's perspective tags, but I will look into that. That's a great question. I don't think so because I don't believe they have access to these type of analytics. All right, any other questions? Okay. All right, so.
Hello, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, yes, go ahead.
One thing, I was trying to play with Gradescope this morning, and I was trying to play both student and teacher to see how it works, because that's sort of the way I think. And I was wondering about when you set up a template, and what do the students actually see?
So depending on whether it's if it's a variable length template, right? The ones where they actually have to indicate where their question, like what pages they can find each question, what they'll see is they'll see their assignment pop up, like pretty much like a PDF uploaded. So they'll actually see all their pages. They'll actually then have to indicate, they'll have to click question 1 is on page 1, page 2. Question 2 is on page 2, page 3, for example, something like that. And so let me see, actually, that's a good question. And you know what, will you be able to say a little bit for the breakout session?
Yeah.
Okay.
No problem.
So
as I said, I was trying to do this, but it's hard.
It's hard to see, right, from a student.
And
you have to kind of.
And I wanted to play both student and instructor, and it didn't really like that.
Right. So actually.
So the other thing on that is okay. So let's see the template. Okay. Anyways, that's so that was the is what do they see as the template? So Oh, the other thing was, instead of scanning a file in, could they type it in and save it as a PDF file and upload it, and then can Gradescope just, deal with an uploaded PDF?
Yes.
I mean, right? I mean,
yes.
You can scan by your
format.
phone, but you could type everything in and save it as a PDF, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So when it's student submitted, then they can type it, as long as they can convert whatever they have to a PDF, they can definitely do that.
Right.
So the concept is
I've been doing like my assignments as Word documents and allowing them to, okay, you can submit it as the Word document, but maybe if I just allow them, convert it to PDF and then submit it to Gradescope, and it's all good, right?
Right, exactly. Yep, they can do that. They don't have to actually handwrite anything. I think they allow for handwriting most.
I'm sure I'm going to have students in the class as doing it different ways. So that's the other thing is some students may want to scan, some students may want, right? I mean, but it can handle all kinds of different ways of student submission for one assignment.
Yep,
Awesome.
absolutely. As long as they can convert to PDF, they can, yep, it can accept it.
Okay.
Yep.
As long
Good
as it's a
question.
PDF,
Mhm.
Gradescope will figure out how to deal with their PDF. Although I think they have to help Gradescope do that.
Right. They will tell Gradescope kind of where to find all their answers. Yeah. Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. Exactly. Yep.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, great. So, okay, oops, sorry, go back for a second. So in this next section, what we're going to do is very briefly, we're just going to show you some of the additional assignment and rubric examples, because you saw one example of a variable length, but it's kind of important that you kind of see a few other examples. But before we start that, we actually had set up a Gradescope demo course for everybody here to be able to play around with. So if you would like to be added to our demo course as a TA, Kaylee will be happy to put in your name and email address in the chat, and Kaylee will add you into our demo course. So once again, just name and email address right in the chat, and we'll add you to the course, and you can start playing around with that. Right. Okay. All right. So here is an example of a Calculus 1 exam. And this is going to be now that fixed length type of template, right? Where students most likely, this is probably most likely you're going to be sitting in class, the students are taking your exam, but you want to be able to grade this in Gradescope and not have to grade it by hand, right? So they're actually going to submit it to you once they finish writing in here, right? The rubric type we're using here is going to be a multi-level. It's going to be an EMRN rubric, and we're going to go over how to set that up. So what you would choose here is an exam or quiz. You're going to click next. And here, like I said, an exam and quiz defaults to that fixed length template. So you don't actually even have a choice, especially if you're going to be the instructor submitting it. If you decide to do student submission, then you will have a choice. But like I said, there's really no difference then between setting this up as an exam or setting it up as a homework. Anyway, so here you're going to select PDF. Right, so I'm going to select that specific. Now it's going to ask me to set up the outline. So the way a variable length outline and a fixed length outline differs is that in this fixed length one, you actually have to draw boxes to designate where your answers will be found for each question. So when I draw this box, then that'll correspond to 1.1. A here, and when I draw this box, it'll be once again where students need to write their answers, because that's where Gradescope is going to be looking for those answers. You'll also want to make sure that you actually have a name region and a student ID region. This is so when you actually upload these exams, you'll actually have to link it to the corresponding student. So it's a very easy kind of list. Your TAs can do this, but based on their handwritten names, hopefully they'll be legible. You then have to link it to the appropriate student in Gradescope. Okay. So once you're reading your student exam files, so once again here, select your PDF files. I know this really does seem like a monumental task, especially if you have extremely large classes, but Gradescope actually provides really good resources on how to manage student scans. And according to Gradescope, even with all that time spent scanning, instructors have reported that Gradescope actually still saves them 30 to 60% amount of time compared to just grading everything on paper. Right. So once all student exams have been uploaded and you've matched student names to the papers, right, you could actually start grading. So now what's really cool with fixed length assignments is you actually have this extra grading option where Gradescope actually has an AI that can help you form answer groups. So rather than grade all student questions individually, you can actually grade in groups. So what this means is that if the answer to your question on an exam, for example, is m equals 2, right? Gradescope's AI will group all students that wrote m equals 2 into one group. They'll group all students that wrote a different answer. So let's say you had like a certain number of students who wrote m equals 1 into another group. And then all students whose handwriting they just couldn't recognize, they couldn't decipher, they'll put them they'll set them aside. And then you can actually grade all of them in groups. Keep in mind, this actually only works this next fill in the blanks. So if you choose to grade in answer groups, just make sure you choose the right answer, specific answer type, and then you're going to click on this button down here. Oops, sorry, I forgot to show you. So multiple choice marks, it can grade. It can also grade that text fill in the blank. And then you're going to click on review answer groups, right? So here you'll see anything that Gradescope has already pre-grouped together will show up on the right. So here, I didn't have that many submissions, and this is my poor computer handwriting, so it didn't recognize anything. But what you can do is you can create your own groups, and then you can easily drag these into a group. So if I know these all say m equals 2, and that is the correct answer, I'm going to drag that into a group called correct. And now when I'm grading, I'm actually grading by group. So using this method, I could be grading 20, 40, 50 students at the same time. So this saves you a ton of time in with grading. So this is one of the reasons why instructors particularly love Gradescope for this, this feature. All right. And for this assignment, I also mentioned we are using an EMRN rubric. So for this type of rubric, the way I suggest you set it up is you set up your group to be EMRN rubric. Oops, sorry. Here we go. And each of these criteria, each of these items is going to be its own item group, right? And one thing I did here that's unique is for the not accessible, I actually set it up as 2 items, one where it's fragmentary response provided, one where it's no response provided, because it's actually interesting from the analytics you'll be able to see. So let's say this is the last question on an exam. Maybe it's not that students didn't know how to do the question, maybe they just ran out of time. So if they didn't provide a response, you can actually see, oh, actually, most of my students, it was that they didn't provide a response. It's not that they provided a fragmentary response. So maybe I have to adjust my exam because they just ran out of time to do it. So just little things that you can think about when you're setting up these rubrics, right? Okay. All right, so that was an example of a fixed length rubric. This last example is going to be an online assignment. And this is a biology assignment. We're doing a DNA knowledge check. And this is an assignment that students can typically do digitally. So if you kind of envision, like, well, this is what it looks like on paper, right? These questions, but if you were to build this in Canvas, all right, you could build it in Canvas quizzes, or if you want, you can try Gradescope's online assignment, which is once again equivalent to Canvas quizzes. There are going to be, for the rubric type, certain questions can be auto-graded, which is nice. And then certain questions that are open-ended, you will still have to, attach a rubric. So here we use the binary pass/no pass rubric. Okay. So for this assignment type, we're going to select online assignment, and then we're going to click next. And right, we're going to give this assignment a title and set our due dates, late dates, same thing, create the assignment. Okay. There is something important here that you have to, under the assignment settings, you'll notice that there are actually additional options in regards to when answers and explanations will appear for auto-graded questions and how short answer questions are treated. So this is important that you know that these settings are here so you can make the appropriate adjustment. And then, right, and then you're going to set up your online assignment outline. So notice that you can add questions here by typing your questions into that text box, and then you'll use this drop down here, the insert field, to select the way you'd like answers, like students to answer the question. So you can choose between short answer, free response, multiple choice, select all, and file upload. And as you create your outline, you'll notice that a preview will appear on the right, and you can see what it looks like, to students, right, on this side. And once again, you can use LaTeX and Markdown to format your question and question text as needed. Also notice that depending on the type of question, you'll need to format the correct answer in a very specific way. So for short answers, it's in parentheses. For multiple choice, you use an X. You can follow, Gradescope has a guide to creating answer input fields that was just put in the chat. Thank you, Kaylee. So you can follow that guide and to set up all these questions. Right. So once your outline is all set up and it's released to students, students can now take your online assignment. So in terms of grading, there are 3 types of auto-graded questions here. So you, Short answer, yeah, multiple choice and select all can all be auto-graded, while free response and file upload has to be manually graded. All right, so even with the auto-graded problems, actually students won't be able to see the correct answer until you decide to publish your grades. Okay, so for this is just an example of what you can attach an image also to a question, and this is an example of a manually graded free response question. Once again, put in your rubric item, provide comments as needed, and this is an example of what it looks like to have a file upload. So this is what you'll see when you're grading a file upload question. We're right about out of time, and I have just about 5 minutes left to talk, and then we will go into breakout rooms. But any questions about those two types of assignments? Okay, all right. Very last thing, just Gradescope, a few best practices and considerations. First, a good best practice, make sure you set aside time to practice using Gradescope. You see, it's a very complex tool. There's so many functions. It's very powerful. I love it, but it takes time to learn. So you can definitely use our T Sandbox demo course to play around with the grading. You can also use the default 101 and 202 sandboxes to practice. These are the ones that Gradescope gives you, so you can practice with those too. We would strongly suggest that you provide a Gradescope practice assignment and resources for students to onboard them with this program. So in your syllabus and getting started module, provide like a blurb about Gradescope and a link to the Gradescope Student Help Center, which we've linked in this slide. You can try, or I would suggest that you add a practice assignment in your course that requires students to practice submitting a Gradescope assignment. An extra tip here for those of you doing specs grading, you can actually make this a token earning assignment. So that's kind of like a nice little thing that you can have them do. And another best practice, definitely take the time to onboard your TAs. You have to remind TAs that any changes to the grading rubric that they make will retroactively change for all the assignments that have already been graded. Also, all TAs will receive a notification of a rubric change, but it's important that the TAs understand that. And please remind TAs to use that next ungraded button when they're grading. And lastly, make sure you, if you want students to be able to see a rubric before they're graded, add the rubric as the first page of your template or add it in the assignment description in Canvas. So just keep in mind that a Canvas rubric actually cannot be attached to a third-party tool assignment, so you can't kind of mix and match the two of them. But students will only see that final grading rubric that you did in Gradescope after they're graded. So if you want them to see a rubric beforehand, make sure you provide it somewhere else. Lastly, is Gradescope right for you? So Gradescope is most beneficial really for large classes and for any classes where you have multiple graders and need more consistency in grading, and also for STEM courses that have a lot of handwritten problems, equations, computations, programming, and where you find yourself giving a lot of repetitive student feedback, right? Certain limitations to Gradescope that you should be aware of. Grading must be done after the late date because Gradescope allows students, once again, to have unlimited resubmissions before then. We talked about that before, so just be very aware of that. Resubmissions also for the purpose of specs grading may sometimes be difficult to handle because when a student resubmits, sorry, my Alexa just went off. When a student resubmits, grading needs to start from scratch. Not that there isn't a history of that grading, but some faculty have said that this is one reason why actually they chose not to use Gradescope, because once students resubmit, their grading rubric kind of gets wiped out and then you have to kind of match it back up to the one that you've already graded. And finally, this is a big limitation also, you cannot assign assignments to specific students within Gradescope, which is, I hope that they change that, but that's another thing that you have to be aware of. Okay, the next 3 slides are just additional links and resources for you for getting started, for just general help resources. If you are a T participant, in our technology page, we have a Gradescope section for you. And we have additional resources with links and unique details that I wasn't able to cover in this presentation, but I think that you find useful.